Hi and welcome to this DCP web tutorial. In today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to use the rigid body tools in Blender 2.82. Okay, let's go ahead and open up Blender. I've installed the latest version, which is 2.82. I'll advise you install that particular version. It seems to be the most stable. It's 2.82a. So go ahead and install that. If you're not sure how to do that, I'll put a link in the YouTube description. Let's go ahead and click on General, and we've got our basic scene set up already. Okay, I'm going to turn on my screencast keys. You don't need to do this, but I just want to turn on the keys so that you can see what keys I'm pressing down here. So as I press the keys, you'll be able to see what keys I'm pressing here. Now, what we want to do is actually delete this cube. We don't need it, so let's just click on it. It will highlight this orange color. Let's go ahead and delete that. Let's start saving our work. We don't want to lose anything, so let's start saving our work from the beginning. So we'll go into this folder and we're going to create a new project. So let's call it rigid body -01. Save it like this. So we just save our file. So the first thing we're going to do is create this chain. So we're going to have a chain coming down with a ball at the end of it. It's going to smash into some text, and we're going to use the physics inside Blender to do that. So let's just middle mouse click and rotate around so we see the red line and the green line like this. We want it like this. And in fact we want to rotate around this way. We want the red line this way and the green line going this way. Okay, let's press Shift A and insert a torus. This is a torus shape, and we're going to rotate it on the x-axis. So press R to rotate, X, and then press number 90. Right, so there's a few different ways to rotate objects, but that's the easy way. Use the shortcut keys. And we want to now go ahead and edit this torus. Before we edit it, we're going to press number 1. Number 1 will take us into the front orthographic so we can see it nice and flat, the object. Let's use our mouse wheel to zoom in a little bit, and we'll go into the edit mode. So one thing to note is when we're in edit mode, there's an option up here called X-ray. So if I go ahead and let's say we've deselected everything, so click outside of the object, and if I left click here and drag to select half, the top half, right? If I middle mouse click and rotate around, you'll see the back half isn't being selected, and that causes a problem. So if I press number 1 and if I try and stretch this in some way, you'll see that the back half won't stretch correctly, right? It's going to do this weird thing, right? So let me press Ctrl Z to undo that. Let me press number 1 to go back into the front orthographic. I'm going to left click to deselect everything, and I'm going to turn on the X-ray. Let's turn this on. So you turn this option on and off as and when you need to use it. And basically when you do a selection now, it's using this X-ray, so it means that it's going to select all of the vertices at the front and all of the vertices behind as well. That's what the X-ray does. So we'll just press number 1 to get us back into the front orthographic. We've used the X-ray tool and we selected all of the front and all of the back vertices, and we're going to click on the move tool, and now we can grab this and drag it up, and we want to drag it up so it's like this sort of size, right? It's almost like a bit bigger than one of these blocks, just a little bit higher than one of these square blocks here, the big square block, right? Something like this. Let's go back into the object mode. So we've got one of the links of our chain. We've designed one of them. We can right click on this and shade it smooth so it's nice and smooth, and here's our first link. We'll press number 1. That takes us back into the front orthographic, and we're not using the X-ray at the moment, so let's turn that off. And we want to duplicate this link, so let's click on the move tool so we can move it. But the registration point, this point here, we want to place it in the middle. So let's go to Object, Set Origin, the origin point to the geometry, right? Like this. So now it's sitting in the middle of this object, the rotation point we can call it. Now we want to duplicate it, so we'll click on it. But before we click on it, let's not make a mistake. Let's go up to the scene collection here, right click and create a new collection. So click on scene collection here, right click and create a new collection, and it's going to be called collection 2, and let's call this chain here, and we'll drag our torus and we'll drag that into this collection. And then when we expand, it's almost like a folder, and it's going to contain all of our chain elements, and it just makes this scene collection a much more tidier, right? It's going to make it tidier. One other thing we can do actually before we continue is go to Edit, Preferences, and inside the add-ons type in PIE, P-I-E, and you want to turn on the PIE interface here. interface, 3D viewport, pie menus, and if you expand it, there's loads of different pie shortcuts here. So there's some shortcuts that we're going to be using during this tutorial, and it's worth having this, and it's worth probably screen capturing it somehow. So if you expand it like this, you can screen capture this, and then you'll be able to learn the shortcuts for the pie menus, which will help us later, right? So if I close this, normally when you press Control S, it will just save it. But now when you press Control S, you'll get these pie options open, right? So we can just click Save. So we'll save it. Let's click on the Move tool. Let's click on this object. It's been placed inside of this collection. We should rename this to Chain Link. Would be a good name for it. It's one chain link. Let's click on it. Press Shift and D to duplicate, and then hit the Enter key. Now let's see what's going on here. Okay, we can minimize this, right? So now we can see it. So this is showing the object inside here. So this is the new one that we just created. It's called Torus 001, and we want to drag it up so that it overlaps this other torus, but we want to rotate it on the z-axis 90 degrees. So let's press R to rotate the Z key and then type in 90. So now you can see the links are joined together like this, right? They're kind of joined together. Let's press 0. No, so let's actually press number 1. That will take us back into the front orthographic. I'm going to roll my mouse wheel so I can zoom out a little bit. And you can hold down the Shift key and the middle mouse button to pan, right? And we're going to left click to deselect and then select both these objects. And then press Shift and D to duplicate both of them. And we're going to drag them up again so they overlap like this. So now we've got 4 links in our chain. And then we can select all of these. I'm pretty sure there's an easier way to do this, but I'm going to just do it the way I understand. Let's just zoom out a little bit more. And now we've selected all 4. We can press Shift and D and then hit Enter and drag those ones up, right? To like here. I think this is right. Is this working? Here to here, this position. You want them to be linked together like this, right? So we're building this chain. Now we can select a lot more of them. And press Shift and D and then hit Enter and drag it up and just link it. Just keep linking them, and we're going to keep building this chain. We want it to be quite long, so we select all of these. Make sure you don't select the light source or the camera. Make sure you're only selecting the chain elements, right? And you can see why I've made this collection here. So we're going to have lots of chains, and if you leave this on the root, it's going to get messy. It's going to be hard to work out what's going on. So put it into this collection. It's a wise move. Let's click here, Shift and D, and then hit Enter. We need to zoom in a little bit so we can see what we're doing. We're going to drag it up, and we're going to link it like this here. Let's see how long that is. I think that's going to be long enough. Basically, the longer this chain, the more momentum the ball is going to have, right? So if the chain is much longer than this, then it's going to have more momentum, it's going to have more speed. This ball object that we're going to create at the bottom, like a chain on a ball. But I think this length is going to be pretty good. So we've got 1 here, we've got 20, what, we've got 31. So we've got 32, including this one here. So let's minimize this. In fact, we'll leave it expanded for the moment. Let's save our work. Let's go to File, Save. Okay, I think a wise thing for us to do while we're working on this chain is to hide the camera. So let's click on the camera and hide it. Let's click on the light source and hide it. This just makes selecting this chain much easier. We won't accidentally select the camera or any of the other objects in the scene. We should go ahead and File, Save As, and save this as a version 2. So just click the plus sign and we'll add a 02 at the end, and we can retain our original file. I like to save in different steps. So if I want to come back and do some more editing or change something quite dramatic, then I've got other steps that I can come back and duplicate and then start another path of work. But let's go ahead and save this, and we're going to click on the very top link, the very top one. Right, let's select that very top link at the top, and we're going to go to the physics and click on rigid body. So when we click on rigid body, we want it to be active for the moment. We're going to leave the mass at 1 kilogram. We're going to have some problems here. We're going to fix them. We're going to leave it at dynamic, and inside the shape we want to set it to a mesh shape, because it's a mesh object. So we're going to hold down the Shift key. Let's make sure my screencast keys are on for you. So we're going to hold down the Shift key and then left click and select the rest of the objects. So you see this top one's like a yellow color and the rest will be like this red sort of color. We're going to go to Object and we're going to go to Rigid Body and we're going to say Copy from Active. So the top one is the active, and all of these other ones will inherit whatever the top one settings were over here. So if we were to click on one of these chains, you'll see it will have the same setting each one of these links. If we go ahead and click the play button, the chain will start to drop down now, right? So it's behaving based on the physics within inside Blender. So Blender is simulating physics like on planet Earth, basically. That's what it's doing, yeah? So we can see the chain is dropping down. Let's just zoom in here. You can see this chain is above or below the red line here. Can you see this red line? We want to make sure that this chain is above this red line. This is going to be our floor in a moment or a little bit later. So let's go ahead and select this whole object, and we'll zoom down and we'll press the letter G to grab it, and then Z to lock it on the Z axis, and we can move it up a little bit to about, let's say about here. It's probably about 1, 2, 3, 4 squares above. Let's go ahead and press Shift. We can middle mouse click so we can see this at some sort of angle. And we'll go ahead and press Shift A, and let's just insert a plane. The plane is tiny, right? So let's scale it out a little bit, and we'll click on that plane, and we'll go to the physics, and we'll set it to a rigid body as well. Rigid body here, and we're going to set it to passive. Set it to passive. Let's go ahead and save this, and inside of the shape here we want to set it to box. Set it to a box shape, and in theory if we click play now, the chain will hit this floor, right, and do all of its physics goodness, and that's it. The chain is hitting the floor now, so it's actually colliding with the floor and it's animating and doing all that good stuff for us. Now obviously we don't want that chain to just drop all the way to the floor. We want to constrain this top link. So if we click on the top link, and now we're just manipulating this top link only. If we click on it and go to the settings and set that to passive, right, set it to passive, let's save our work, and then click play, you'll see the chain will drop down, but then the chain breaks here. You'll see that, right? If we click play, and it took me a long time to work out what is going on. Why is the chain breaking? What are you doing? And it's just falling through this, right? Now I can't explain it to be 100% correct, but from what I understand, if we were to go into the property settings here, we can see the chain is one increment in size, right? Here, one increment, this one chain link. This one increment is actually 1 meter. It's 1 meter in size. So when Blender is doing the physics for this, each one of these chain links is going to be 1 meter in size. So you can imagine 1 meter chain, and you've got like 30 of them. That's 30 meters. 30 times 3 is 90. So this chain inside Blender is 90 feet tall, which is ridiculous, right? So what we can do is just select the chain. Make sure we don't select the floor. So deselect the floor. Best way to do that, let's just hide the floor for the moment. Let's just hide it. And then we can select this chain and then press S to scale it, and scale it right down to something like this size. So it's much smaller. Now when we go ahead and click the play button, you'll see the chain don't break. The chain, it does break. Okay, so let's see. Let's try and scale it down some more to about here. And I think the weight of the links is too heavy, so we're going to have to reduce. You can see it's like rendering, and it's breaking here now, right? You see how it's breaking on the third one rather than the very top one. So these three can hold, this one here can hold the weight of these two, but it can't hold the rest of the weight of these links, because each one of these links now, although it's smaller, it still weighs 1 kilogram. Let's go ahead and click File, Save As, and save it as version 3. And let's save this, and we'll try and fix this so that we won't have that problem. Okay, so we need to work with this chain. So what I'm going to do is just left click and select the chain. I'm going to go to the properties section. I'm going to click on just click inside here, then left click outside. And I want to scale this to about 0.7, somewhere around that sort of number. It can be a little bit bigger. So I'm just going to press S to scale, the letter S, and I'm going to scale it out to 0.7, just around 0.7, somewhere around this sort of number here, 0.7. So the chain's a bit bigger. Let's go to File, Save As, and let's save this as version 4. And the next thing we want to do is just sort out the rigid body on this chain. So let's press number 1. That will take us into the front orthographic, and the chain's already selected, so just left click and select all of this chain object, and let's go back to the rigid body settings, and what we'll do is set up most of the chain and we'll do the top part afterwards. So let's go ahead and set the chain to, let's set it to active. So all of these objects will be active. We'll set the weight to 4 kilograms. We'll leave it at dynamic. We want it to be a mesh, and we want to, let's just check these settings in here. I think all of this should be just default. We just leave this all as default for now. All of these settings here we can leave as default. So we want to now get the rest of the chain to inherit what we've given to the top one. So let's go to object, rigid body, and copy from active. So when we do that, now all of these chain links will have that 4 kilogram applied to them, right? But let's click on the very top one, this very top one, and with that top one we want to leave it active but set the mass to 10 kilograms and turn off dynamic. This is quite important to turn this off, and pretty much everything else should be okay. So if we go to file, save, let's just try and play this, and we can see now the chain will hold itself, right? It's not breaking apart. So that allows us to put a ball at the end of it and then swing the chain, and we can break something. Let's break something. I think, I'm not sure what we're going to break here, but we'll be breaking something. Okay, so we want to create some sort of ball object at the bottom of this chain. So let's go back to our very first frame. Make sure we're on our very first frame here, and let's click on this bottom link here, the bottom one. Let's just zoom in, hold down the shift key, let's zoom in, let's turn on my screencast keys, make sure you can see what I'm pressing, and we'll click on this very bottom chain link, and we want to really move the 3D cursor, this 3D cursor, to the center point of this chain. We can do that by using the shortcut key Shift and S, and we do cursor to selected here. That will move the 3D cursor from here to the center point of this object, right? And if we zoom in, we can zoom out a little bit actually. We're just going to press Shift and A and insert a UV sphere. This UV sphere is quite small. If we zoom out a little bit and we press S to scale, we can scale out that ball, right? So I think it needs to be about this sort of size. We don't want it to be too massive, maybe a bit smaller than that, something like around this size. And this is the chain and this is the ball. So if we click play, the chain will fall straight through the ball. We don't want that. So let's click the pause button. Let's go back to the first frame and let's zoom in. And what we'll do is turn on our X-ray. Let's turn on our X-ray so we can see through. We can even turn on the wireframe, that will help us as well. So we'll go to wireframe and turn on X-ray. Let's click on the ball, then hold down the shift key and click on the chain, and click on 3 of these chains, these 3 elements. So there's one chain here, one going across, and then one down here. So we just select all 3 and then press Ctrl and J. That will join all of those objects together. So they're going to behave as one object now. And when we click the play button, we can see the chain doesn't break, right? The ball just stays at the bottom of this chain like this. So we can swing this now and smash into something, I guess. We'll have a bit of fun. So our chain is stuck at the top here and the ball is at the bottom. Don't worry about if it's playing quite slow. If it doesn't render out fast, we're going to change the speed of this animation a bit later. Let's click the back button. We've got a chain, we've got a ball, it's stuck to the top there. Now we can do a bit more work. So let's go to file, save as, and let's save this as version 6 will be wise. Okay, so we've got this chain set up here, but our plane, our floor is hidden at the moment. So let's enable it so we can see it. So you can see the floor here, but it's located inside of the chain collection. This collection that we created called chain is sitting inside of it. So we're going to take this plane and drag it to the main collection at the top here, and then we can just minimize this chain collection and hide it. We don't want to see it for the moment. Now we want to create some text, and whenever you create an object, it's always going to place, Blender's always going to place it wherever the 3D cursor is, this cursor right here where my mouse is. So let me press the letter N. Let me just turn on my screencast keys, and we want to move this object or this 3D cursor to the default position right in the middle of this environment. And we can do that by pressing Shift and C. Shift and C just resets that position of the 3D cursor. So the reason why we did that is now when we middle mouse click to rotate around and look at this floor, we can press Shift and A and go to mesh, in fact go to text, and we can place our text on the floor. Otherwise it would have placed it all the way up here somewhere, because that's where the 3D cursor was. Let's press number 1. In fact, let's press number 7. That takes us into the top orthographic, so we can see the text looking flat down at this text, right? You can see the floor here, and we're looking down at the text. And we're going to press the tab key. The tab key on our keyboard, the tab key takes us into edit mode, and we're going to delete this text. In fact, we can go into solid view right now, and we're going to type some text in. Let's go into wireframe for the moment so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to type in smash s, let's type in, let's left click here, smash s, m-a-s-h, smash. I'm going to type it in capitals. You can type anything you like. I would say try and use a small word. The smaller the word, the better it's going to be. So try and maybe use smash, and then you can change that to something else later. Let's hit the tab key. Let's hit the tab key. Well, let's go back into object mode. I was hitting the caps lock. We need to hit the tab key to go in and out of the object and edit mode. So now we're back into the object mode. This text is already selected. Let's go to the text options here, the properties, and the horizontal we're going to set it to center, and then the vertical we're going to set that to center. So now the 3D cursor and the registration point, what do they call this? Not registration point, origin point. The origin point is in the center of this text, so when we rotate or do anything with the text later, it's the best place for it to be, basically. We want to change the font. Now you don't have to, you can use this font if you want, but I'm going to click on font and click open, and it's going to take me to my Windows directory where all my fonts are stored. I assume if you're on Linux or if you're on Mac, it's going to take you to the relevant directory, and inside here I'm going to type in impact, because it's quite a big font, impact. I'm just going to double click and it will change it to this font style, but the fonts are really close together, right? They're packed quite tightly together. So I'm going to go down here and increase the spacing. I want to have a bit of space between them, like a nice gap in between each font. And we want to rotate this now. So if I just middle mouse click to rotate around, so I'm going to hold down the middle mouse button. Let's make sure my screencast keys are on. So I'm just going to middle mouse click, and I just want to rotate this on the red line, which is the x-axis. So if you ever forget what the lines are, you can see them up here. Let's just press R to rotate X and type in 90. So our text is facing this way, and this ball is going to come in from the side and smash into this text. And what we want to do is make that text a bit thicker. But to do that, we should be wise. We're going to press number 1. Number 1 will take us into the top orthographic, and we're going to turn our chain back on. And now we can see the size of the ball, and we want our text to be bigger than that ball. So we want to scale it, but also make it quite thick. So as we zoom out, we can still see the text is selected, right? Our text is selected. We're kind of seeing through everything because we're in wireframe, and that helps us to set the thickness of this text, but also the size. So let's scale it first. Let's press S to scale, and we want to scale out this text. So we want to make it quite big, something like this size. So you can see the letters are here and over here, the first letter and the last letter. Now we want to scale the thickness, because this ball's going to come in and hit, and this is way too thin. So we're going to go to the geometry here, and we're going to extrude it. So we're going to set it to probably about, I think 3 is a bit too big. Let's set it to 2, right? So if we middle mouse click and rotate around, we can kind of see the size of the text. Let's just zoom out and see this ball. So this ball is going to come and smash into this text, and I still think the text is a bit too small. So let's press S to scale and scale it out some more. And let's press number 7 to see how it looks like from the top. And I think that's going to be pretty good, right? We want to set it to around this sort of size. So you can play around with that, but I reckon this sort of size is going to be pretty good for us. So let's go to File, Save As, and let's save this as version 7. We're on version 7. Okay, so let's go ahead and click on the floor. Let's select the floor. In fact, we can go into like solid view, right? That will help us. And let's turn off our X-ray, and we want to make sure that this text is above the floor. So let's go ahead and click on the text, and in fact we'll drag that into the main collection up here as well. Let's drag it to the main collection. This plane should really be called a floor. Let's give it a good name. Let's do that lowercase floor and we've got a light here that's turned off at the moment. We've got our text. Let's just drag our text so that it sits above this plane basically. So let's press number 3 and we can just see that it sits above this. We want it to be above this green line, just above it. We're going to adjust that later, so don't worry about that too much. We'll press number 1. That takes us back into the front orthographic, and we want to turn off the floor and the chain. So let's hide the floor. Let's hide the chain, the floor and the chain. So all we got is our text now. Let's left click and select this text object, all of it. And at the moment, we can press the tab key. We can click on it and press the tab key, and we can go in and edit the text, right? But we don't want that. So it's called smash at the moment. Let's press the tab key to go into object mode. Click on this text, go to object, go to convert to a mesh object here, mesh. So when you do that, you're going to convert it into a mesh based object, and you can no longer tab and edit this text. So whatever you write there, you want to make sure that's what you want before you convert it into a mesh object, because you can't really edit the text now. You can't change the characters. You can change the style of the text, like the vertices, you can manipulate them, but you can't change the actual words anymore. So this is good to go now. And what we want to do is break this text into parts, because right now it's behaving like one object. So if I drag it, you can see everything moves with it, right? Not individual letters. So I'm going to press Ctrl Z to undo that, and I want to go into the edit mode. In fact, let's not make a mistake. Let's click here. Let's go to this collection. Let's right click. In fact, let's go to the scene collection up here. Let's right click and create a new collection and call it text. So we've got a new collection called text. We're going to drag that text object into this collection. That's quite important. And we're going to expand it. And we're going to click on this text. Not expand this. Let's just click on this text here. So it's selected. Let's just go into object mode, right? The text is selected and it's inside this collection. We'll go into edit mode. We'll press the letter A and then select all here, and that will select everything. Or you can just left click and drag across, and we're going to press I think it's the letter P. So press the letter P on your keyboard and then do by loose parts. So separate by loose parts here. Let's click that, and you'll see the text object has been broken down into individual elements, but we want to group them back again. So we're going to go back into object mode and left click. Now when we select these text, it's broken into separate parts. So like there's the top of the text and the back and the front. Now we just want to join the letter S together because it's broken into a few different parts. So what I'll do is left click on the front. I'm going to rotate with my middle mouse wheel. So I'm going to hold that down. I'm going to hold down the shift key and select the middle part, and then rotate around to the back. Hold down the shift key and click this part as well. So I've selected all of the letter S, the front, the back, and the actual object in between. And I'm going to press Control and J. I'm going to join those elements together. I'm going to do the same with the letter M. So I'll select this, hold down the shift key, select the top part, and then select the back part and press Control J to join that. That is now one object. You can click it and it will behave as one object. We're joining those components together. Let's turn off our 3D cursor. In fact, should we do that? No, let's leave the overlays on actually. Let's click on, let me see 1 second. Yeah, we'll leave it on. Let's click on the letter A at the front. We'll click on the top and the back, and then we'll press Control J. And there's one more element in here. Depending on the letter that you selected, there's like a, can you see when I click, there's like a little triangle shape that sits inside the letter A. We want to select that little triangle shape, then click on the main object and press Control J one more time. In theory, once we're done, we should only see text written here for the amount of characters. We should only see 5 in here, 5 in total. So if we click on the letter S here, click on the top part, and then rotate around, hold down the shift key while you're doing this, select them all, press Control J, and then click the letter H at the top, the front should I say, the top and the back, and then press Control and J. So what do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 characters, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements. If you've got 5 in here, you've got 5 on the screen, you know you've done it right. If you see more than 5 in here, then you know you've still got a problem. Something hasn't been joined together, and that all depends on how many letters. If you've got 10 letters here, then you should see 10 elements in here after you join everything together. Let's go to File, Save As, and save this as version 8. Okay, so let's go back and turn our floor back on, our floor. So we can see our floor, and this floor is pretty small. So we're probably going to click on it and press S to scale and scale it out a bit. Let's make it a bit bigger. Something around this size, which is actually 44, around here, 44 by 44. And we want to now add some color and some lighting and do some stuff to this text. So let's go ahead and do that now. Let's just save our work. Let's minimize this for the moment. We'll open up this folder on my desktop. We can see all the different versions we're building here. Let's right click, create a new folder, call it HDRI, and let's open up that folder and let's go to the web browser, and we'll just close all this stuff I've got open, and we'll go to HDRI Haven. So we type in HDRI Haven, we'll click on this website. Let's just we'll leave that here for the moment. Let's just minimize this a little bit, and we're going to download some maps. So let's scroll down, click on Browse 200. I'm going to click on the scroll across and go to night. Click on night, and I'm going to download this one. In fact, I'm going to download this one here. So I'm just going to left click on there. I'll put a link to this in the YouTube description. So let's make a little note for you that I need to put a link to this. Just going to make a quick note, bear with me. Notes. So we'll link to that, and we'll scroll down and click 4K here, and we'll download this HDRI map and we'll drag and drop it into this folder. And let's pick another one. Let's go back, and there's all this selection down here as well that you can pick the categories. Let's do something like morning, afternoon, and we'll click let's see, you got to go and experiment with these, right? So all of these are going to produce different lighting in your scene. So it's down for you to go and experiment with these and see which ones. So I'm downloading only 2 of them, but I'll suggest that you go and download quite a few different ones. Try and find ones with different color in them, different scenes, and let's try this one here, for example. Let's click on it, and I'll copy that link as well. I'll put that in the YouTube description so you can download this same one and try and download a few others, because then you can go and experiment with them. We'll download these 2 for now. I think that's enough. We'll drag and drop that into here as well. Let's close this. So we've got the HDR right here. Let's go back to Blender here, and we'll go to our shading here, shading. Let's go to object and go to world settings, and I'm going to zoom in here. You can middle mouse click to pan this around. We've got one background here. I'm just going to drag it a bit closer here, and we're going to press, in fact we should let's see, yeah, let's just middle mouse click and rotate around here a little bit so we can see this text. You can middle mouse click and rotate here, and we'll move down to here, press Shift and A, Shift A, and go to shader background and drag it here, and then press Shift and A again, go to shader, and we'll go to a mix shader here and drag that between these 2 and connect this background to the shader down here like this. Then press Shift and A, and we want a texture environmental. We're going to drag that here and connect that to here. Let me make some more space here, and then we're going to press Shift A, and we want a vector mapping. So we want vector mapping, and we're going to press Shift and A, and we want a texture coordinate here. So we'll connect the vector to here, and we'll connect the generated to the vector at the top here like this. And last of all, we want to press Shift A and do a light path, and the is camera ray. In fact, I won't do it. In fact, yeah, let's do that for the second. Let's drag that over to the factor here on the mix shader like this. Right, so you can see the setup here. I'll leave it here for a second like this. It should be set up like this. Then you can click the open button, and you can go to the HDRI folder, and you can select one of your maps. We've got 2 in here. You can have 10 in there if you want. You can experiment with them. Let's click open, and let's go to the render view. Render up here, render view. So we can see a bit of lighting and a bit of color, but our objects don't really have any materials to them. So let's add some materials to them. Let's go to the layout, go back to our layout tab. Let's go to the render view, and let's click on this smash text. Let's click on the letter S. The letter S, and we're going to go to the material, and we're going to create a new material. So click here, make sure you click the letter S, click on the material, and let's just call this, let's call it text material, and we're going to turn the metallic all the way up. Now we can see some effect. We're going to turn the roughness down, and we're going to click on base color, and we're going to pick an Incredible Hulk green. Yep, we're going to smash Incredible Hulk style. So let's make it Incredible Hulk colored text. So now you can see that letter S there. So let's just take this material and apply it to the rest of them. In theory, we should be able to hold down the shift key, select, how do we do this actually? We'll click on this letter here, the very last one, hold down the shift key, select the other one, but select this one last. Right, so the one that you want to inherit from, you select it last. Then we should be able to click here and then copy material to selected. Now they're all green, so we just take that material and copy it to all of them. Now that's all nice and green, and we can play around with the roughness and stuff like that in a moment, right? So we can reduce the roughness and we get more of a sort of reflection off of our HDRI map. So it's that map that's giving all of this lighting, yeah? That's what we have to understand. We've got a light source in here, this light source. We're going to just right click and delete it. We don't need it anymore. So we just got the floor here. Let's go to File, Save As. And let's save this as version 9. Okay, so let's sort out this floor. Let's click on the floor. So we've got this floor object and it's called floor here. Let's create a new material. Let's click material, new material. And we'll name this floor material, give it a good name, and we'll set the metallic all the way up, and we're going to bring the roughness down as well here to probably about 2.5, 0.0250, yeah, 0.25. And this background is white, so we're going to go back into our shading here, and in this background down at the bottom we're going to set it to a black color. So now we've got black in the background. Let's go to our render settings. For the render, I'm going to set it to 256, and we're going to turn on ambient inclusion, so you can see like that has an effect, right, with the shadows and stuff like this. We're going to turn on the bloom, and we're going to turn on screen space reflections, and we're going to expand this. We're going to turn off the half trace, set the trace position all the way to the top, and the max roughness, we're going to bring that down a bit to something like this. Right, something like this. So now you can see the reflection on the floor and all that good stuff. And you can play around with these settings depending on your HDRI lighting. You may need to increase or decrease the bloom settings. But if we go to our shading here, we can see our text here. We can actually go into, let me just show you something here. I'm going to just remove the is camera array away from the factor here, and if I zoom out, and if I were to click on this Z-axis here, let's see rotation on Z here. I can rotate the HDRI map. So it's this map in the background. It's a little bit hard to see. Let's drag this down here. So it's this environment, this like the lighting from the windows and whatever lights are in the room. So as I move it around, so if I were to rotate around this way, you see there's more lighting hitting the text, right? But I prefer the other map, so I'm going to click open here. Let's click this open button, and we'll go to the Shanghai one, and we'll click open. And now we can see different lighting and different effects, right? And our lighting will be different for this. But we want to connect this, because if we were to render now, if we press F12 to render, we're going to see the HDRI map in the background. If we wait, so this is not the best camera angle, but trust me, you'll see all these trees and all this stuff. We don't want that. That's why you connect the is camera array to the factor here, and it will hide that background, and now you can see things a bit clearer. And this is the map that I prefer. So let's go back to the layout. Let's press number 1. Number 1 takes us into the front orthographic, and we're doing that. Try and hold down the shift key and use your middle mouse button, and try and get the blue and basically the axis here, or try and get this dot towards the center of your 3D viewport, and then press Control Alt 0. Control-Alt-0 will move the camera to that position. So now the camera is looking at the text because we want to see what the camera sees. So let's turn the camera back on. Let's enable it. And let's go to the camera properties. And let's set the X location to 0. So that will set it on the center point here. And we can move the camera back a little bit. Let's move it up a little bit. Let's move it in the upwards direction. Let's move it back some more to about here. And we can see our bloom is way too much. So let's go to the, we can move in here, zoom in here a bit. Let's go to the, let's just make sure my screencast keys are on. Yep, they're on. Let's go to the render settings here and we can turn down the bloom because it's too strong. We want a little bit of bloom on there because it looks nice, but we don't want too much. So we're going to bring it down to about here. So we get these nice little sort of glow effects around the edges, but not too much glow. We don't want too much glow. Let's click on this floor here. In fact, what we'll do, let's zoom out a little bit here. Let's go to this shading, and now we can move our cursor to here and press 0 on our keyboard. So now we see what the camera sees as well, and we can rotate this map, right? So I'm going to set it back to 0. So right now it's set to 0. I'm just going to rotate it around a little bit till I get these sort of purple colors, these sort of purple shades in there. Maybe around sort of, I don't know, you can rotate it wherever you want really, it's your preference. But I kind of like it to be about here. So we've got some greens and purples, we've got all these different colors going through, and the floor looks a bit better now, right? We can go and click on the material, click on the floor, and we can adjust its roughness to give more of a shine. So you don't want to go too far, you're going to see the HDRI map. So you want to have it about here somewhere around 0.18, something like this. And now it's looking pretty good, right? So let's press F12, and F12 we can do a test render just to see what it looks like. And here we've got our smash text, but our text is not interacting with the rigid body, so we need to now make these objects rigid body objects so our chain and ball can come along and smash into it. We're going to do some particles and a few other things to make it more appealing. Okay, let's go ahead and click on this first letter, the letter S here, and what we'll do is go to the physics settings and we're going to set up a rigid body for this letter S. Let's click that. We'll set it to active, and we want to make this a lighter weight than the ball that's going to swing down, right? So we're going to set it to like 0.5 kilograms, something like this. We can adjust this afterwards, so we're just going to set up the basic settings, and in the shape here we're going to set it to box. At the moment we have one slight problem. Let's try and fix this now quickly. So let's go ahead and click on the letter S and then hold down the shift key. Can you see what's happening? Let me explain what's happening first. So the pivot point, this point here, the origin point is actually in this position here for this letter S, and we need to fix that. So let's fix it quickly. Let's just left click to deselect everything. We'll click on this letter S, we'll hold down the shift key and click on the letter M. We'll click on the letter A, the letter S here, and then the letter H. So we need to select all the objects, go to object, set origin, origin to geometry, and now you'll see the little dots in the middle of each one of these objects. So now you can see the square box that we just created surrounds this letter S. So when we click on it, we need to set it to a box. It's kind of that sort of shape. There are other options in here like sphere. You can set it to a sphere, but then this object will roll. It will roll as if it's a rounded sphere. We might experiment with that a little bit later, but we'll set it to box for now. And what we want to do is we want to set, let's just see 1 second. We want to scroll down here. Let's scroll down to the bottom here. Set this option here, and we're going to set them to 0 values here. 0 values. So let's go ahead and click the play button, and you can see this object will drop down. So you see it dropping down. If we were to drag it up a bit further and then click play, it will drop down like this, right? And it will bounce around and do all this stuff, right? We're going to try and fix that so it will stop bouncing like that. But for now, let's go ahead and file save as. Let's save it as another version, version 10, and then we can try and fix this bounce so it stops doing that. It won't bounce around when it hits the floor. We kind of want it to just sit nicely, and we're going to try and fix that in a moment. Okay, I think the wise thing for us to do is apply this rigid body to the rest of the shapes or the rest of these characters here. So let's click on the letter H, hold down the shift key, and we'll select all of these objects in this sequence. So we select the letter S last. I'm just going to turn on my screencast keys, so make sure you can see my screencast keys, and we'll go to object, let's go to rigid body, and we want to copy from active here. Copy from active. Now in theory they all should inherit that rigid body, right? So if we click play, we can see they're all falling down. It's going to do some craziness, so we need to look at that and try and fix it. But this one here, the registration, or the this point isn't quite set right. Set geometry to origin. So we might have to adjust that manually because it doesn't seem to be setting correctly. Or maybe we should have done that at the beginning before we merged all our shapes and done all that stuff. But it's okay, we can fix this. So what we can do is press number 1 on our keyboard, and we want to move this point here. Okay, so in order to reposition this this origin, yeah, the origin point for this object, let's click on the letter M. Let's go into edit mode, and we'll press the letter A, and then click select all here. So we're going to select the whole object, and this dot here, we just want to just move it up, and we're going to try and get it to the center point of this letter M, around here, maybe slightly higher. Let's say around here. So I don't know if you can see that, but I'm trying to move the position of this dot here. Yeah? So if we go back into object mode, we can see the box is now surrounding that letter M much better. It needs to come down slightly. We want to get the bottom of this M right to the bottom of this box. So let's go back into edit mode and just drag it down just a small amount, and then go back into object mode. Now it's sitting flush to the bottom there, you see. We should really do something similar to this letter S. Let's just try and fix these a little bit. Let's just try and improve this. Let's press A to select all here, and we're just going to drag this one up slightly, only a small amount. And we just want to get the bottom of this S to sit inside of the box, right? So let's try and do that. Move that up just slightly more. We'll press A to select all, and then just drag this up slightly. I think we'll be good there. So it's right sitting flush. This one's sitting right to the bottom here. This one here, you can see it's off, right? So this box is behaving like the bottom of the text, but really there's a gap there, so it ain't going to look quite right. So we'll go into edit mode on this one. We'll press A and then select all, and we're just going to drag this one up a little bit. You have to just eyeball this. So go back into, you can actually press tab to move in and out of the edit mode. So here if we press tab, we're now in object mode. We can see there's a big gap here, so we know we need to bring it down more, and we can bring it down a little bit more. So just use the tab key to move in and out, and you can see where it's sitting nicely. Let's do that on the letter S. Let's press tab. Let's press the letter A, select all, press tab again. You can see we need to move it up. So let's just drag it up a little bit and drag it down a tiny bit. So that sits nicely there. And then letter H here. This one's going to need to go up, right? So we'll press A. So we'll press tab first, then the letter A, select all, and then just drag it up slightly, and then press tab. Now we can see it sitting there nicely. We could probably have, to be fair, you could have done that in solid view, would have been wise, because when you click here and then press tab, you can still see the box. In this view here, it's pretty hard to see, right? In our render view. So if we went into solid view and done that, it would have been a lot easier, but we live and we learn. So we'll press tab. Let's go back into object mode. Let's just zoom out, and let's just press play. So we can see the text here, but it's still doing some funny things here, so we need to look at that, try and fix it. But they are dropping down. So I think what we'll do is go back to our first frame. Let's go into solid view, and let's get all of these text sitting to let's get them all aligned correctly. So let's grab this, and we want the box to be sitting on the floor here, and we'll drag this one down. Let's get them roughly aligned correctly, so they're all sitting towards this floor, right? They don't have to be perfect, but let's try and get them all roughly the same sort of distance, like this. And then we can zoom out. We can select all of them. We have to be a bit careful because we end up selecting the camera. So for now, we just hide the camera. Let's left click and we can select them all. Let's just drag them up to about here. This sort of position, like 1, 2, 3, 4 boxes above. We'll click play. we'll see they drop down, and this letter A is doing something very strange. Let's drag this down a bit, click play again. Alright, so these objects are not behaving the way I expect them to behave, so we need to try and look at how to resolve that. But for now, we've dropped them from this sort of height. We could even drop them higher, right, from all the way up here. We have to go back to the first frame, click play, and they're hitting each other, right, before they even get to the floor. They're interacting with each other, so we need to try and resolve that. Okay, so the reason why this simulation of these objects dropping down looks a bit strange, can you see this one's flying off in this direction, this letter A? So as we move across here, we can see it's just going off into this direction, this letter A. They're just not dropping down straight. The reason for that, after doing a little bit of digging, is these objects, or some of them, are already hitting this ball here, right? So they're already interacting with the ball before even the ball gets across to smash into them. So what we can do is just select all of our text objects, select them all, and just drag them down a little bit here. Just drag them down a little bit. And when we click play now, you'll see they will hit the floor, but this ball will come and smash into them, and that's why that letter was getting pushed through the floor and doing all that crazy stuff. It's a little bit confusing, but I worked it out in the end. So really want to deal with this ball and chain, because we want it to swing in from the side, right, and smash into the text from the side. So let's try and resolve that. Let's go to File, Save As. Let's save this as version 11. Okay, so this ball and chain, we want to rotate the whole object so that it swings down from this direction. To do that, we're going to click on the very top link. You have to click on the very top link here, and we're going to move the 3D cursor to that position. So we're going to press Shift and S to open up our little pie chart, and we're going to do cursor to selected here. That will move the 3D cursor to this point, and we can click on this drop down menu, and we can rotate depending on what we select. We can rotate on the bounding box, we can rotate, that's the default one, the bounding box. We want to rotate on the 3D cursor to pivot around the 3D cursor. So we're going to select this option, second one down. Then we're going to left click and select all of these objects for this chain here, like this. And then we want to rotate on the Y axis. So we're going to press, let's just make sure my screencast keys are on for you. So we're going to press R to rotate, then Y, and we're going to rotate this object around to sort of this sort of angle, like this. And if we were to play the simulation, our ball and chain will come down and smash into the text, but the chain is not really, we need to move this down a little bit, right, for it to hit the text properly. So we can just zoom out. We're on our move tool already. We can just drag this down a little bit to just a small amount to around here, and we click play. Our text will drop down, and then this will come along and smash into it. Maybe if we can use like we can move back here, right? It's hitting it quite low and it's bouncing off the floor. So I reckon we can bring it up a little bit. Let's just drag it up slightly. Go back to the first frame. Click play. Let's go back to the first frame. 1 minute. So we have to undo that. I made a mistake there. So let's press Ctrl Z to undo that last thing we did. And let's go back to the first frame. So it's moving from here, so we're making a mistake here. Let's just press Ctrl Z until we see the object back in this position. Yeah, it needs to be on the first frame when we move it down. That's quite important. So I think this is pretty good. That's a pretty good place to be, right? We can drag it down. We can maybe move it up slightly, but do it on the first frame only. Make sure you're on the first frame. And we just want like this ball to skim the top, like there. It's kind of hitting the floor first, so maybe we can bring it up slightly more. Let's see if that's kind of hits correctly. I think that will do. Although this letter S doesn't move very far, right? It's going to come back on this swing, but I don't think it will hit it. So I think we'll bring it down slightly to make sure that letter S gets pushed off of the camera view. Let's check it now. It should really push it off the camera view, right? There you go. It wipes them all out. So we're going to speed up this simulation, but for now, let's go into our render view, and let's press 0 on our keyboard, because 0 is going to show us what the camera sees, right? And if we click play now, we can see the text drop down, and then this ball is going to come across and smash into it. So as these text elements drop down, let's go to File, Save As. This is a pretty good place to save it. We'll be on version 12. As these texts drop down, I want to have some particles flowing out of them. So what we'll do is press Shift. In fact, what we'll do is press Shift and C. Shift and C will move the 3D cursor back to the center point here. So when we create our objects, so they'll be created here. So that's quite important. And we should really rotate around the bounding box now. Bounding box center, this one. Set that back to its original state. Then we'll press Shift and A, and we'll insert a UV sphere. So we've got one UV sphere here. Let's click that and press Shift and D to duplicate it. We'll hit the left mouse button to confirm that and drag it across. So we've got basically these two spheres. Let's click on the first one, and they're both called spheres and they're sitting in the text object. We don't really want that. So let's select both of them and drag them into the main collection. Let's call this one text particle, and the other one we'll call it chain. Let's call it ball chain particle. So we've got these two different particles here, and on this one here, the text particle, we're going to click on the material, add a new material. Let's just double click in here, copy this name, paste it into here, so it'll be called text particle material. Let's go to the surface here, change it from principal BDFS to emission, and we set the emission strength to 10. So now our particle will glow, and we need to choose a color, right? So maybe we'll go for, let's just go for some crazy colors. Let's do like this pink color, or maybe red. We can change these colors afterwards, right? So don't worry about it too much. Let's click on this letter S. Let's go to the particle system, create a new particle system here, and we want to go to the render settings here. Where it says halo, we want to set it to object here, and we want to turn on random scale, and we want to click here and select the text particle. So if we click play now, we see particles drop out of this letter S, right? And they get smashed across and all that good stuff. But we want those particles to bounce off of the floor. So let's click the floor. Let's go to the physics settings, and we want to set it to we want to set collision here as well. So we can have it as a collision and as a rigid body. So in theory, our particles should bounce off of the floor. Now you can see they're bouncing off the floor. That's what we want. Now we want to apply that particle system to all the other objects. So let's select them in reverse order. Let's click the letter H, hold down the shift key, select all of them, and make sure you select this letter S last, because that's the one that has the particle system. We can go back up to the top here, click I believe here, and then copy all to selected objects. Copy active to selected objects here, this one. So in theory they should all have particles now. Let's see. Let's try that again. So then it must be copy all to selected objects. Copy all. Let's try that. Play. No. So maybe we're doing this wrong. That should work. Let's click this one. Hold down the shift key and select these in this order. So if we do it the other way around, let's see. Or maybe we select this one first. Maybe we have to select the particle system character first, then select them in the other order, the reverse order, like this. And let's try copy all to selected objects. Copy active to selected objects. So that still doesn't work. So let's see what's going on here, because our objects are not dropping either now, right? So something's not quite right there, and this isn't swinging anymore. So we've broken something. This is why we save a version. So let's go to File, Open. We won't save this, and we'll open our version 12. This is why I save versions, because when something goes wrong, it's good to have a version that you can quickly go back to, right? So this one is all working, and here we are. So what we should really do is maintain this version. So let's go to File, Save As, and make a version 13. So if we do anything and it goes wrong, we've still got our version 12 to go back to. This is why you keep versions. Otherwise, we have to unpick what we've done here. That was a mistake, and that's just going to take time. So let's click here. Let's go back to the particle system. There's a couple of ways to add the particles, but let's try and do it this way again. We need, in fact, we'll use halos for now. So we'll create the object for it afterwards. So if we click play, we should see the little halos dropping out. They're just temporary particles. Let's click on the floor, and I think maybe let's go to the physics settings and set it to collision. Let's just see if that broke something, right? Let's go back, click play. It's still dropping, and our object thing is still flying across. So that didn't cause any problems. So let's select this object. Let's go back to the particle settings, and settings can be found inside the particle context. So here, and this is the active object, right? I'm pretty sure. Well, let's click the letter H. We'll select them this way, so the S is selected last, and we should easily be able to click here, copy active to selected objects. So these should all have particle systems now, but that's breaking it, right? So doing that is breaking a whole, let's just, yeah, that's breaking something. So we're going to have to do it a slightly different way, I think. So let's just go to File, Open, don't save. We'll open this version 13 again. Sometimes we have problems, and rather than just skipping past them and just cutting past all of this stuff, I'd rather show you how to do things if something goes wrong, right? We want to learn how to do or correct things. So let's click this one. Let's just do it another way. So we just add a particle system to it. We'll click on this one. It's not the best way to do this, but we'll add a particle system here. So both of these have particle systems, so those should work independently. It might be better doing it this way, because we can actually control each one separately. So we just click on the letter S, go to the particle system, and then just go to H, particle system, and add one. So now all of these have particle systems, and that seems to work. All right, now we want to click the floor, go to the physics settings and set that to collision, so the particles will bounce off of the floor now, and that seems to cause a problem. So let's remove that. I think this is causing a problem. Right, let's see. That seems to cause a problem when we have a rigid body and a collision on the same plane. That seems to cause a problem. So we could ignore that and just have the particles drop through the bottom, but that isn't great, is it? So let's go back to File, Open, don't save it, and we'll save Open version 13 again, and we'll try another way. What we'll do is we will, let's see, what we can do is click on this floor. So we've got the floor already. We're going to press Shift and D to duplicate it, and then hit enter. So now we've got two floors basically. We've got two different floors. This one is the rigid body, and this one will be our floor collision. So we've got two copies of this floor basically sitting on top of each other. The floor collision, we're going to go to the physics settings and turn off the rigid body and set it to collision. Now in theory it should work. So if we click on the letter S, let's just go to the particle system and add a particle system, and we'll click on the letter M and add a particle system to that one. Let's click play. Now the particles will bounce off of the floor and we won't have that problem. So there is a way to fix things. Sometimes you have to experiment and try and understand what's going wrong. Sometimes you don't know what's going wrong, but you need to find a solution, right? So in theory we should be able to copy the particle system across. So we should be able to delete this one off of the letter M go to the letter S. That one has one, right? So if we were to, let's see, let's click on the letter H. Let's save this at the moment because it's actually okay. So let's go to File, let's save it as version 14. We'll click on the letter H, hold down the Shift key, select all of the other letters, and make sure this one is selected last because this one has the particle system. Let's try and copy active to selected. Let's try that now. Now it's copied them across. The advantage of copying them across is you can manipulate one, and in theory all of them should inherit that that particle system, whatever you do to it. So let's press Shift and C. Let's turn on my screencast keys. Let's make sure they're on. If we press Shift and C, that will reset all of the viewport. Let's just make sure this is still swinging. It's still swinging. Let's go back to the first frame, and I just wanted to reset the 3D cursor so we can press Shift A and create those particles. So let's create one particle here. Let's create the correct object. Shift A, mesh, sphere, UV sphere, right? So we've got one UV sphere here, but this is not moving correctly. So let's click here and select bounding center box. Make sure you select that option there. So when you move it, you move the origin point with it. And then we'll press Shift and D to duplicate, hit enter, and drag that one across. Let's click this one, and it's called spheres in here. Let's select both of them and drag them to the collection at the top here. And this first one we'll call it text particle, and the other one we're going to call it what was it, ball chain. Well, let's just call it, yeah, let's call it ball chain particle. Let's double click on here, copy this name. Let's just select it and copy it. Click on it, go to the material. Let's create a new material. Set it back to the emission shader. Set this value to 10. Let's name that material correctly. Let's call it text. I've written article. Should say particle. And where are we? Text. Particle. Now we can change its color. Maybe we'll go for like a yellow. Let's see, like an orange. Oh, let's do orange. We can change the colors after. So it's nice, nicely glowing. So we want to apply that particle to this system here for this text. So let's click on this text. Let's go to the particle system. Let's go back to the render. Turn it from halo to object. Set random scale. So there'll be random size particles. And in the object we'll select text particle. Let's see if it applies it to all of them. So you can see it's applied it to all of them because we inherited from the first one, right? So we fixed that. Now we want to we really want to add a particle system to this sphere here. But let's sort out the material for this sphere, because at the moment it's not looking great, is it? So let's press 0 on our keyboard to go into our user perspective. We was in camera view. Let's go into user perspective so we can see this object. Let's go to File, Save As, and save it as version 15. Let's click on the ball object. We need to make sure, yeah, let's click on this ball object here at the bottom. And what we would do is go to the material, and we'll create a new material. Let's call this ball chain, and the base color I want to set it to like a gray. We can adjust that later, and we want to set the metallic all the way up and bring the roughness down, and then right click on it and shade it smooth, so now it's like a nice shiny metal object or ball at the bottom, right? And you can change the base color. It doesn't have to be that color. You can pick any color you want. You can make it blue if you want, any color you like. Maybe we'll make it like a blue color. Let's see, we'll leave it like that and we can change it afterwards. Let's click on this first chain link here, the first chain link. Click new and call it chain link, and we will give that a material. So let's set the base color. Maybe we'll make these ones like a gray material. Set the metallic up and bring the roughness down. I think I'm going to make this gray as well, to be fair. Maybe we leave it blue. It kind of looks good blue. We'll click on this link. Maybe we'll make that a slightly different blue color. And you can pick any colors you want, right? You can change them afterwards. But we want all of these chains to, all of the white chains here, we want them to have this blue color. So let's go ahead and select all of those objects, but not the ball at the bottom, right? And then we can go here, click on this drop down and select chain link. I think we should be able to. In fact, we can't select this first one. We have to deselect the first one. So hold down the shift key, deselect that first one. We should, in theory, it doesn't seem to want to work. Let's see. What is this one called? It's 31, right? And this one here is 2. So we want to select this one, 3. Scroll all the way down, hold down the shift key and select 30. So we don't want to select this bottom one, and we don't want to select the very top one. Now we can go here and select chain link, and they should all change color. Let's see. Copy material to selected. Let's do that. Now they're all that color. Now they're all that blue color. Now you can just go into, you can click on any of these chain links, the first one for example, click here, and you can change the color of all of the chain links now. Alright, quite easily. And the ball itself is independent, so that can be its own color. If that makes sense, hopefully that makes sense. So let's go over, let's zoom back out. Let's just zoom to this object here. And it's white, and it's got no material. So let's give it a material. And it's called ball chain particle. So let's call it ball chain particle. Now this one is called, let's see. It's called ball chain particle. That's fine. We'll copy that name. Let's paste it here. Let's go to the base color. In fact, let's set it to an emission shader. And in here we'll set it to a value of 10 so it glows. You can leave it white if you want, but I'm gonna go for a like a pink color, and we'll sort out the colors in a moment just to see what it looks like. Let's press 0 on our keyboard, and then we can hold down the shift key, middle mouse, to pan the viewport so we can see what the camera sees. And let's press Ctrl S to save our work, and then click play. Got particles flowing out of here. Our chain is going to come down, smash it, but we didn't apply the particle system to the ball, to this ball thing here. So let's go and do that. Let's go back. Let's go to the first frame, zoom out. Let's click on the ball object here. Go to the particle settings. We'll create a new particle setting for it. And this time in the halo, we'll select object, and we're going to select the ball chain particle. So we can set the random scale up. And in here, the object, we're going to set it to, let's see, we have to scroll down, I think, PQ. Oh, here it's at the top. We select that one, and if we click play, you can see the particles flowing out of the ball now, like this, and smashing into the object. Let's zoom in. Let's just see it again. Okay, so we're almost there. Most of it seems to be working. Let's go to File, Save As, and let's save this as version 16. And really, we want to sort out these colors, so we can scrub across the page here, or the timeline should I say. In fact, we need to play it, right? We need to cache the animation. We can stop somewhere like around here, or we can keep playing it a bit more. See this red line down here? That's it. That's Blender working out where all of these objects. So now you can actually scrub through it because it's memorized it. So we can set it to about here. We can work out what our colors should be. We've got blues and greens and pinks and yellows and all sorts, right? So let's click on the yellow. I don't mind too much, but I think the blue and the purple ain't right. So maybe this purple needs to be a blue color. So that's the ball chain here particle. Let's go to its system. Let's click here and let's change those particles to blue. So now we've got this yellow, blue and green sort of shades going on. And let's click play again. We only have a handful of blue particles, so we want more than that. So if we go to the particle system, click on this object, the ball itself, and then we go to the particle system, we can assign more particles. So let's set it to like 5,000. Let's go crazy. Let's do 5,000. Let's go back and click play and let it play through. And then we've got lots more particles, right? Trailing through it. And it's going to come back again eventually. Here it is. And the particles are no longer showing. So that tells us the particle system isn't running long enough. So this all ends on frame 250, right? So let's set this to like frame 500. Let's set it to 500. Use your mouse wheel to zoom out on the timeline. And you can see your first frame here, and you can see frame 500 here. So what we want to do is really zoom out a little bit. And our simulation is not long enough, basically. You can see it kind of gets stopped. Let's just try and sort that out. Let's go to the scene properties, and inside scene properties we've got things like gravity, so it's simulating gravity here, but we've got the rigid body settings, and inside here, let's see, inside the cache here, we want to set it to, let's set it to around 400 frames, 400 here, and if we click play it should simulate longer now. So it will go down here. It might sort of slow down when it gets to this point. Let's just see what happens. We can see when our particles finish off as well. So our particles end there. The ball goes to this side, right? So really we don't want to sit, probably about here is where we want to end our simulation, on around frame 260. In fact, let's go back there. Frame, let's say around here, frame 260. The ball is outside the camera view, so we won't see it in the camera view anymore. So we can set this to 260 here. There's no point in us rendering out more frames or doing more calculations than what we need. We're only up to frame 260 unless you want it to swing back in again. Now what we want to do is let's save this first. Save as version 17, and we want to make sure the particles are still showing on the way out. So that tells us the particle system for this is ending too quickly. So if we click on it and go to the particle system, we can see we start on frame 1 and we finish on frame 200, and the lifetime of the particle is 50 frames. So this should, in theory, should be okay, but let's just play it out one more time and we'll see when them particles end. They're flowing here. It kind of does its thing here, but I think because it goes so high and it's taking so long, the particles end before they get to go across the screen. It still doesn't seem to have so let's go to the particle system. Let's set our, we can either increase the lifetime or increase the end time. So let's set the end time to around 250 here. Let's go back. So we should see more particles on the way back in, at least. Let's just see what happens. It should last longer, right? As you can see, look, they're lasting longer now. And let's just see what that very last frame looks like. Right. So we've still got particles in our animation scene. Let's just save this work. So I think what we really need to do is have this ball go a bit further so these particles can fade out. They have enough time to fade out because they've stopped now, but we're finishing on this frame, so we need to have this go a bit further. So what we want to do is go back to our scene and set the cache to maybe 300 frames, an extra 40 frames. So we'll cache for an extra 40 frames. Let's set the end frame here to 300. So we've got extra frames. And let's just click the play button. And we're good there, right? So let's just see. When we get to here, bang on 300 frames, all the particles have disappeared from the scene. So if there's a will, there's a way. Now I think we found the way. And this looks pretty good. So now there's a few other things we can do. Let's save this. Let's save this. Let's click save as. Let's call this version 18. And I'm going to call it version 18 space. In fact, we'll call it version 18. Let's see. I'm going to call it rigid body OK version 18. This is like a good version. let's save that, and we're going to save another version and call it version 19. And we'll leave the, let's get rid of this OK, because we don't know if it's going to be OK. So we'll call it version 19. So really we can go and render that version 18, but we probably want to do something with the camera. So let's see what we can do. Let's click save. There's a couple of things you can do in here to change this simulation, and we need to cache it as well. So we're going to cache it in a moment. Before we do that, these letters don't have to weigh the same amount. So if we click on the letter S and go to the physics, we can see it weighs 0.5 kilograms. If we click on the letter A, and let's say we set that to 10 kilograms, it's going to be 20 times the weight of these other letters. Now when we click play, this is going to be a much heavier object, this letter A. Can you see it drags a lot more? So you don't have to set them all to the same weight. You can click on the letter M, for example, and set it to like 50 kilograms. Really heavy weight. Let's click play. Now can you see what happens? This ball object is hitting that letter M, and that letter M is very, very heavy, so it's affecting the physics. So it's hitting it hard, but the M is has more weight than this ball probably, right? We can check that. Let's just make sure that's true. Let's click on the ball, and the ball weighs 4 kilograms, but the letter M weighs 50 kilograms. So you can actually set the weight of these shapes to affect how the animation works. It's quite interesting, right? So you can click on this letter M. That 50 was too high. Let's set it to something like 20, and let's see if we can get this smash looking a bit better. So that's probably still too heavy. We have to experiment, right? If you don't experiment, maybe we set it to around 10. So it should be like double the weight of the ball itself, right? That one's gone flying off into the distance. So you can go and experiment. I mean, there's endless sort of permutations and options in here. Default is, what is the default? Default is 0.5 kilograms, yeah? So we should set this one back to 0.5, and maybe what we do is set the letter S to a heavier weight. Let's set it to something like 15 kilograms. So all of these will get hit quite hard, but this letter S will slow things down in our simulation as the ball goes across. Let's see how that affects it. And I like that because this one goes flying off in this direction. So you can see how we're changing the weights. That's going to affect this animation, right? So I think that's pretty cool. I quite like that actually. Why this letter M spins around, I'm not quite sure. I'll have to try and figure that out at some point, but I think this looks pretty good. Right, so our camera is very static. You can see the camera doesn't move at all at any point. So really we want to try and get some movement in this camera. So let's go to our camera. Let's turn it on. Let's just do a test render. Press F12. Let's just see everything we can see is correct. So it all looks correct here. But really our camera could be up a little bit, and maybe it will drop down, or maybe we can zoom in or do something to improve this animation. So let's go to File, Save, and save it as a new version, because we're going to start animating our camera. This will be version 20. A lot of versions. You can delete the old ones if you don't want them, but I like to keep all the versions. And we want to click on the camera, and we want to add a keyframe. So let's hit the record button. Let's go to the camera properties, press the letter I here and the letter I here. So we insert keyframes for the first frame for the camera, and we can't really scrub across and see everything. We've got to really cache this, right? Let's untick this record button. Let's go to save, and let's go to the scene settings here. And then we want to bake all dynamics. Click this bake all dynamics. So this will take a few seconds to bake out. It's not a complex animation by any means, but it will take a few seconds depending on your machine. Now that's cached inside Blender, let's go to File, Save. We can now scrub through this timeline at whatever speed we like, and we'll be able to see the animation sequence, right? Now I was mentioning to you before that we can speed up the animation sequence. Can you see this ball that comes in? It's a little bit slow. Now there's one problem I found. If you go to the settings here and set it to something like 2, speed 2 here, and click play, let's just see if that makes any difference. let's set it to something higher. Let's set it to 4. Let's see if we can actually see a difference there. It's a bit hard to tell. Let's set it to let's set it back to 1. Let's see. So I don't think it's affecting the speed of the animation. So what I've found is if we go to File, Save, even if we delete this bake, so if we delete the bake, let's click Delete All Bakes, and if we change the the speed settings here to like 2 and click play, let's go forwards. I think that is working faster, but let's try and bake it all again. So we set it to 2 value here. Let's click Bake All Dynamics. So it is recaching it, so maybe it will work. I was having a problem before. Maybe, I don't know, I've installed the latest version of Blender. Maybe it's some bug or some fix in there, but it wasn't really simulating it twice the speed. So let's try that now. You can see everything drops faster and this thing comes across a lot quicker, and it will swing along a lot quicker. Your particles move faster. By speeding up the simulation though, the ball has kind of gone across a few times because you made it twice as quick. So you can see our ball ended there before, right? But it's still on its way back, which I don't mind actually, and it's still going this way. And then our simulation will end there. Let's just check, like on this last swing, it's just going to swing across this way. So I don't mind that actually, that it's going across a few times. I think that's cool. That's okay. But now it's all cached in the system, right? So we can move through this quite quickly. The reason we cached it is we can work out where our camera is while we're doing this sequence. So if we move across, we can see around frame, let's say around frame 40, it's starting to hit the text. So whatever we do, we need to try and do it between these sort of frames. We want to try and be in this position for the camera for when it hits. Not necessarily this position, but we try and get a good camera view of it, right? So let's go ahead and click the record button. We'll click on the camera, go back to the camera properties and press the letter I here and the letter I here. So our camera is set for where we want it to be. So now we just need to decide where does it start from. So we'll click this button here that takes us back to the first keyframe, and we can move the camera now. So we can move it upwards, we can move it down, we can move it from the side, or we can move it backwards. I think I want to move it like backwards a bit. Really, these two objects, we want to get them out of the camera view. So let's zoom out a little bit, click on this one here, hold down the shift key and click on the other one, so you select both of them and just drag them way up here somewhere, so they're always going to be outside the camera view. That way they'll never get seen. So if we click the play button, we can see the camera moving in towards the text now, right? We moved the camera during these keyframes. Let's just click on our camera. Let's make sure we click on the camera here. Camera. Let's click on this ball chain. This ball chain seems to have a keyframe here. It shouldn't have one. Let's just right click it. I'm not sure if we should do that, but let's try. Let's just right click it and delete the keyframe. That shouldn't be there. Should still work. Yep. That ball chain shouldn't have a keyframe. It should be the camera. I have 2 keyframes here. So I reckon it would be nice if, say around frame 80, we could rotate the camera as these objects are moving to the side, right? So we've got the record button on. Let's press the letter I for location and rotation. So press the letter I here and here. And let's just make sure my screencast keys are still on for you. And we're going to rotate this on the Z-axis. So we'll rotate it around this way, so we can see the letters kind of flying off and doing their thing. So it's kind of following the camera, right? Or following these objects. And let's say around here, we want to rotate back to our original degree. So let's click the letter I here and here, press the letter I, and on the Z, let's set it back to 0. So let's see. Let's just click the play button. It's all a bit rigid. So what we need to do, inside of my settings, I probably didn't mention this, but in the preferences on the animation, I've got the default interpolation set to linear. So that's why the camera is a bit rubbish in terms of its movement, right? It's a bit, you can see how it moves, it just kind of, it's a bit robotic, right? So we want to fix that. So what we can do, let's try a few things. So let's go into the dope sheet here. Inside the dope sheet, we want to select the camera settings, not the text particles, the camera. These two sets of keyframes here. These ones across the top. Let's just make sure we only select camera. Let's see. Let's just minimize this one, and we want to select. Let's move this out of the way. Let's select these keyframes here, and then we're going to press the letter T, and we're going to select back here, back. And if we go back to our 3D viewport, and if we go here and click play, we should get a little bounce back, right? And we're going to do the same with the camera when it moves to the left. Let's go back to the dope sheet, and between these keyframes, we'll select them. We'll press the letter T, and we'll select back here as well. And let's see what that does. Let's go back to the general, so I have 3D viewport. Click play. We have a little bounce here, and then it will bounce. Can you see? But it goes a bit quick, doesn't it? Let's click on our camera. Our text particle seems to have a keyframe here as well. I think I selected too many things when I added the keyframe. Let's click here and delete this keyframe. We don't need this. It shouldn't be here. Let's see how this is working. So this looks all good. It bounces and it moves pretty quick here, right? So what we want to do is click on the camera, and we want to extend this keyframe here because it moves pretty fast here. So let's take this keyframe, let's drag it out a bit. Let's see. Maybe this keyframe here, we need to move it closer to here, like around frame 140, so it stays there for longer, but now it's taking too long to get back, right? So let's shift it to around frame, we have to just adjust it, it's almost there, right? So we'll just bring it back a little bit more. That isn't too bad, right? Let's just play it out and let's see. I think it would be nice if when it gets to here, the camera is zoomed out a bit more so we can see possibly this object as well. So we can click on this keyframe and could move the camera back, right? But not too far. Let's try and move it. We can undo this afterwards if we don't like it. So let's move it up. Let's move it back. Let's try and get that ball chain, the ball itself, and the text in there as well. Let's see. I think that might work better. I think that looks good. I think we're there. And then we just need to do something on these last keyframes. Maybe what we do is, let's see, assume it's going to go this way. So on frame 300, maybe we'll move the camera forward a bit. So let's press the letter I here and the letter I here. Let's just move our camera forward a bit so it gets closer to that ball chain as it swings across. Then we haven't got any sort of static movements. I think that would be okay. Maybe we'll put the bounce towards the end as well. So let's go back to our dope sheet, zoom out a little bit. Let's select these ones here, press the letter T and select bounce, and let's just see what effect that has. Let's untick the record button to turn it off. Let's click play. Yeah, I'm not convinced we should move the camera forward. It doesn't look right to me. Like here. So I think the easiest way to fix that is to select this keyframe, just this one, so it should be yellow. Right click, copy it, click on this keyframe, hit the delete key and delete that keyframe. Move the timeline cursor to this position on frame 300, right click and paste that keyframe. So the camera won't move in this this point here, but we might rotate it slightly. We want some movement, so let's try and rotate it maybe upwards slightly, just a small amount. And I think that's going to be it. I think we're good there. So we just need to render this out now and see what it looks like, the end result, and then we can play it out and see how good it all sort of worked out. So this was quite a long tutorial, but I've learned quite a few things as well, so we're both learning, which is always a good thing. Let's save this. Let's go to our output settings. So I'm pretty happy with the bloom and everything else. You want to make sure your reflections and stuff is all good. Maybe we should do a little test render on a frame. Let's say about here. Let's press F12. Let's see what it looks like. Right, that's what it's going to be. Got a nice shiny object, got all the reflections and all that good stuff and the particles. Happy days. Let's go back to the first frame. Let's go back to our output settings here. We've already cached everything, right? So let's just double check. We should click bake all dynamics here. Bake all dynamics. Make sure that's baked. Let's click save. Let's move to a frame. Move to some sort of frame like this. Press F12 and make sure you see particles and everything. So you see all the particles. That's all good. So we're good to go. Let's go back to the first frame. Let's go to the output settings here. We'll leave everything as it is. I'm going to set it to 30 frames a second. So it'll be a 10-second animation because it's 300 frames. And you could render them out as PNGs if you wanted to. I'm going to render it out as an AVI JPEG. And we'll click the open folder. We're inside of the correct folder. Let's get to the correct folder. This one here. This is not this one. This one here is with our no. Let's go to my desktop, find it. What do we call that folder? Blender 2.82 rig here, and we've got all of the versions here, right? And we're going to render out this version, which is version, what is it? Version 20, I think. 17 or 18. I don't know which version is it. Let's just save this as we need to give the file a name, so let's call it animation -01. Let's accept this. Let's just go to file, save. Let's see what version we was on, version 20. And then we'll just press Control and F12. Control and F12 will start the render. So this will be the first frame. It's always worth checking that you see the frames, at least a few frames being rendered. So you can see the particles coming out. So we can pause this video now and we can come back and check the animation sequence once it's finished rendering. Okay, so Blender's finished rendering out all of our 300 frames. We see 300 frames here. We can close this. Let's go ahead and click the save button and we can close down Blender. So inside this folder, we've got all of our 20 different versions or versionings of our project. This is really the last one that we created, number 19, actually number 20 right here. So we can go back and open this or make a copy of it and then go and edit it and change the colors and do other things and re-render. But let's go ahead and double click on this AVI file and we can watch the video animation. Okay, so overall I think the video animation came out pretty well. Obviously we can improve that in many different ways, but the idea here was for you to go and learn how the rigid body tools work in Blender, so now you can go and create something yourself. You can be very experimental with that and create some quite interesting animations, right? So now you've got those basic concepts and those basic skills, you can go and improve this animation. So if you do make an improvement or you do something very, very cool, why not drop me a link in the commenting on Facebook, or if you see this on YouTube, drop it onto YouTube comments, send me a link to your work, and it would be nice for me to see what it looks like as well. I hope you find this tutorial interesting, and I hope you learned something, and I look forward to seeing you in the next DCP web tutorial.